Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Professor Shushmita Basu Majumdar from the Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. Today in the subject Indian Culture, in the paper Indian Epigraphy, you will be learning with me three inscriptions of the Mauryan realm. So these three inscriptions are 13th Rock Edict of Ashoka, Barabar Hill Cave inscriptions, and the Jogimara cave inscription. So let us learn about the 13th rock edict of Ashoka first. As we know that Ashoka had actually issued several edicts, and these edicts were of exhortatory character, and that's the only reason they are unique. And if we divide them into two groups, then we can broadly say that the rock edicts and the pillar edicts are two different groups. Among the rock edicts, we have the major rock edicts, separate edicts, minor rock edicts, and cave inscriptions. And in the pillar edicts, we have the major pillar edicts, minor pillar edicts, and of these, the latest group is the pillar edicts, and the earliest ones are the minor, to be followed by the major rock edicts then. So of these major rock edicts, we will be discussing only the 13th rock edict of Ashoka. The major rock edicts have been found from the border of the Ashokan Empire or the Mauryan Empire. So the situation or the location of the edicts actually gives us an idea about the extent of the Mauryan Empire. To learn about the 13th rock edict, we will follow the methodology of learning it from the translation and not from the main text, because this will make things easier for you. If you want to learn more about it, the Prakrit version, you have to go and see the text in the Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum, Volume 1 by Holz. So here you have the text in translation, and you have different versions of the same thing. So the Ashokan inscriptions are actually different recensions or duplication of the same text at different sites. So you can get the Girnar version, the Kalsi version, and so on and so forth. The 13th rock edict which we are talking about mentions the Kalinga War. So it basically begins with the Kalinga War, and it also mentions about the date. So Ashoka's time frame is actually one of the most significant time in the history, about which we know specifically when he ruled, because of the mention of the Greek rulers which has been mentioned in the 13th rock edict. So let us learn more about the 13th rock edict. Here you see a few portions are broken. So the broken portions are given as dots. So here in the first line you see the Kalingas, then in the next one 100,000 in number were those who were slain. There are many times as many as those who died. So it's actually talking about a mass destruction of lives. After that, now that the country of the Kalingas has been taken, a zealous study of morality. Then it goes on, and then the portions are broken. So this line actually talks about how after the Kalinga War, Devanangpiya, that is Ashoka, Priyadarshi, has actually taken recourse to the path of Dhamma. Slaughter, death and deportation of people that is considered very painful and deplorable by Devanangpiya. Then Ashoka mentions about Brahmanas and Shramanas, and also mentions about obedience to mother and father, obedience to elders, friends, acquaintances, companions and relatives, and even to slaves. And here we find that relatives and companions are incurring misfortune, that is, those who have died in the battle, and he is expressing his remorse towards the people who has actually been killed in the Kalinga War. It is very significant to note that this particular edict, that is Rock Edict 13, has not been engraved in the Kalinga region. So we have got two edicts from Kalinga, that is the Dhauli, and the Jaugarh, that is the ancient territory of Samapa and Tosali, where Ashoka takes the decision of omitting a few edicts, that is Rock Edict 11, 12 and 13, which actually talk about the remorse of the king. So here he cannot actually mention this to the people of Kalinga that he is remorseful and he has slain so many people. So this will again give them pain. So he takes the decision of not engraving these, and instead two more edicts are actually engraved, which are called Separate Rock Edict 1 and Separate Rock Edict 2. DC Sarkar mentions Separate Rock Edict 1 and Separate Rock Edict 2 as Rock Edict 15 and 16 because Rock Edicts are a set of 14. So there are Rock Edicts from 1 to 14 and we are discussing only 13. Now let us again get back to the text. So here also you can see that Ashoka is mentioning about how to behave with the people. So he talks about the foresters, and he's also talking about abstention from killing or hurting, and also talking about self-control and impartiality and kindness. But at the end of this you can see that the Yona Rajas are mentioned. 5 Greek kings have been mentioned in this edict, to which we will mention later on. But here you can read the name of Turamaya, Antigena and Maga. That is Ptolemy, Antiochus and Maga. And here after the Yona Rajas there is a mention to the Anthras and the Parinthas. Everywhere the people are confirming to morality as practiced by Devanagapaya or as propagated by Devanagapaya. Even where the envoys and have given the instruction on morality and could not reach, they are also conforming to morality. This conquest in every respect, and repeatedly he mentions, causes the feeling of satisfaction, and this satisfaction comes from the conquest by morality, which is again time and again stressed by Devanagapaya. For the following purpose, the rescript on morality should not think that this conquest can be done by killing people. So it should be actually done by following mercy to get results in this world as well as in the other world. That is, he's talking about heaven here. So as we have already mentioned, that this inscription mentions a date of a very specific date when the Kalinga War took place. So all the inscriptions of Ashoka are mentioned in the year of his consecration. So it follows the years of his consecration. So this one mentions that after his consecration 8 years have elapsed, and then in the 9th year the Kalinga War took place. So the date of the Kalinga War is the 9th year of Ashoka. He mentions that 150,000 people were deported, 100,000 were killed, and many times that number perished. Afterwards, now Kalinga was annexed, the beloved of the god very earnestly practiced Dhamma and desired Dhamma to be taught. On conquering Kalinga, the beloved of the god felt remorse, and due to the slaughter and death, he had been feeling this. So time and again we find the description of remorse here, and he also mentions that all suffered violence, murder and separation from their loved ones. So as I have already mentioned that the 13th Rock Edict mentions Kalinga War, the steps taken by Ashoka, the Dhamma which he propagated, and how it is actually giving benefits not only in this world but also in the other world. Ashoka also mentions about his missions, which we have seen. So to various parts he had sent missions, like in the Hellenic world, he had also sent missions to the remote southern part of his territory. It is clear from the 13th Rock Edict that Dhamma missions had been sent to Ceylon prior to the journey of Mahinda. It appears to have been inscribed few months after the earlier edicts, since it conveys a tone of recapitulation. It also expresses a new idea that the conquest by Dhamma instead of war and violence is more propagated by Ashoka. The 5 Greek kings help us to date Ashoka with certainty, and these 5 Greek kings were Antiochus, Ptolemy, Antigonus, Magas and Alexander. There were 2 Alexanders who ruled during this time. So out of these 2, it can be either. The Dhamma which he propagated, he mentions that even beyond his territory, in the southern territories of the Chodas and the Pandyas, and as far as Ceylon, he tried to propagate it. Likewise, herein, imperial territories among the Greeks and the Kambodjas, the Nabhakas, Nabhabhanktis, Bhojakas and Pitanikas, Anthras and Parindas, everywhere the people follow the beloved of the gods and the instructions of Dhamma. Even where the envoys of the beloved of the gods have not gone, people hear his conduct according to Dhamma, his precepts and instructions in Dhamma, and they follow Dhamma and will continue to follow it. The first major event of the reign of Ashoka, which can be definitely dated, thus is the Kalinga War. The 13th Rock Edict gives us the year, that is 260 BCE, that is the 9th year of his succession. We may thus assume that 13th Rock Edict was inscribed in about the 14th regnal year of Ashoka. Cross dating can be provided by ascertaining the date of Magas and determining it to which of the 2 Alexander the edict actually refers to. Now, you have seen that how important the 13th Rock Edict is for understanding the history of the Mauryas and particularly the Kalinga War. To sum up again, I would like to mention that in Kalinga, the 13th Rock Edict was not engraved, and instead the separate rock edicts were engraved. But recently we have found the separate rock edicts also from a place which is not in Kalinga, it's in Karnataka, and the site is Sannati. Again, this is very significant. Why have the 2 edicts or the 3 edicts that is particularly omitted in Kalinga region have also been omitted in Sannati. But in Sannati it's fragmentary, so we are not very sure whether it was a set of 14 or not. Now, from Ashokan inscriptions of this category of major rock edicts, let us move to another category, that is the cave inscriptions, which also falls into the category of rock edicts. So we will go to the Barabar caves and try to see what the inscriptions talk about. At Barabar, we have 4 caves which can be attributed to the time of Ashoka. The Lomash Rishi cave, which is also mentioned as the Khalatika Parvata, that is the Barabar hills, and here we have particularly 4 caves: the Lomash Rishi, the Sudama caves, the Karna Chopper cave and the Vishwa Jhopdi caves. The Lomash Rishi cave does not have any Ashokan inscription. Still we can attribute it to Ashoka because a huge crack developed while the cave was being made, and here we get a later label inscription which can be dated around 1st century AD, and it reads Gorathagiri. And it's very interesting to find that Gorathagiri has been mentioned in the inscription of Kharavela, the king of Odisha, and he mentions that he had attacked this region and conquered Gorathagiri, so and defeated particularly this region. So here this label inscription of Gorathagiri helps us to identify the Khalatika Parvata of Ashoka with Gorathagiri of Kharavela. So this particular region, that is Barabar hill, was known as Khalatika Pavatasa or Khalatika Parvata during the time of the Mauryas. Once again I repeat that at Lomash Rishi cave we do not have any Ashokan inscription. Now let us move to the next cave, that is the Sudama cave. The Sudama cave has the same measurement as the Lomash Rishi cave, and as I have mentioned that a crack developed at Lomash Rishi cave, and that is why it was not donated and the Sudama cave was given instead. And here the Ashokan inscription mentions that after coronation 12 years have elapsed, and now Ashoka has given the donation to the Ajivikas. As you can see in the inscription that the last portion is corroded or eroded. So it is done purposefully and the word Ajivika has been erased, though you can read it slightly from other inscriptions. The inscription at the Sudama cave reads, Lajina Piyadasina Duvadasa Vasabhisitena Iyang Nigoha Kubha Dina Ajivikehi. As I have mentioned, Ajivikehi has been eroded. But this particular cave, that is Kubha, is mentioned as Nigrodha or Nigoha, that is the banyan cave. So a banyan tree would have been there nearby, which gave the name to the cave. And Ashoka had given this cave as donation to the Ajivika after the 12th year from his coronation had elapsed. The next cave, which is at the back of the Sudama cave, is the Karna Chopper cave. And here you can see at the Barabar hill, on one side you have the Lomash Rishi and the Sudama cave, and just on the other side at the back you have the Karna Chopper cave. Inside the Karna Chopper cave you have a similar modern polished walls, and outside the inscription is engraved. The inscription is highly corroded, and in Brahmi characters in Prakrit language the inscription mentions that Laja Piyadasina Ekunavi Sati Vasabhisitena Jaladhosagama Thatame Yang Kubha Supiye Khalatika Pavatasi Dina. That is, this Kubha, this cave, Yang Kubha, that is the Supriya cave, which is in the Khalatika Parvata, has been given to the Ajivikas definitely. And who has given this? Raja Piyadasi. Raja Piyadasi, which was the name of Ashoka actually. Priyadarshi was the name of Ashoka, and it was given in the 19th year, Ekuna Visati. That is in the 19th year after coronation. So the inscription can be translated as the donation of this cave Supiya by King Piyadasi Ashoka when 19 years had elapsed since his coronation. The cave was definitely located in the hill, that is the Khalatika hill. Now the Vishwa Chopri cave, we have discussed this here, but this is one of the earliest inscriptions in the region. That is, it mentions that it was engraved in the 12th regnal year. So we should have discussed it first, but we have discussed it last because it is a little far away from the Khalatika hill, that is the Barabar hill. Though it lies in the same range, but it is a little away, and it reads Lajina Piyadasina Duvadasa Vasabhisitena Iyang Kubha Khalatika Pavatasidina Ajivikehi. And here again you can see the word Ajivikehi has been actually erased purposefully. The inscription mentions the donation of this cave to Ajivikas by King Piyadasi when 12 years had elapsed. So out of these two donations which he made in the 12th regnal year, the Sudama cave as well as the Vishwa Chopri, probably Vishwa Chopri was the earliest. As far as the construction of the cave is concerned, this looks a little earlier than the Sudama, where the perfection is much more than the Vishwa Chopri cave. And it is very interesting that in the Vishwa Chopri cave we do not have any other inscription, whereas in the Sudama and the Karna Chopper we have several other inscriptions which are later additions and mainly travelers and pilgrim records. So this is again very significant, and somebody who had actually tried to erase the word Ajivikehi, that is the Ajivikas, could read the inscription. So probably it can be the King Kharavela, who was trying to take a revenge from the Magathans. He might have done it because he was a Jaina, and we know that the Ajivikas and the Jainas were not at good relations. So definitely somebody who did it purposefully did not want the term Ajivika. Interestingly, we have the term Ajivika in the Nagarjuni Hill cave inscriptions, which are actually donations of Ashoka's grandson Dasharatha. So it is far away from this particular Khalatika hill, a little far away. So there the term Ajivika still exists. Now let us move from here to the Jogimara caves. Jogimara caves are very far from this particular place, that is Bihar. Now from the state of Bihar we are now moving to the state of Chhattisgarh, where in the Ramgarh hills we have the Jogimara cave inscription. Here there are two caves, one is the Sitabenga cave and the other is the Jogimara caves. The characters are Brahmi, that is the script is Brahmi, which can be dated to 3rd and 2nd century BCE, and the language is Prakrit. Here on the map you can see the location of Ramgarh, which is on the northern side of the state of Chhattisgarh. And these are the Ramgarh hills, and when you go close you find two caves. One is the Sitabenga cave. So here you can see the Sitabenga cave, which was a natural hollow, but later on much addition was made, and a flight of steps can be seen to reach the cave, and also place of water harvesting. And the other view is the view outside when you are in the cave, when you are inside the cave. So this is the Sitabenga cave. In 1903 and 4, T. Block in the annual report of the Survey of India gave this line drawing of the cave, where you can see that the cave ends immediately after the water harvesting area. And he has also shown a kind of a bed inside the cave. And when you look at the cave, you see that there is a bed inside. The inscription inside, which I have already discussed, is not a love poetry, but it reads Adi Payanti Hadayang Sabhavagaddakuvayo Eratang Dule Vasantiya Hi Savanubhute Kudasfatang Evang Alang. It can be translated as prepared and handed over. All are welcome here at night, which is actually in feminine gender. So women are actually welcome in the night in the natural hollow cave. A dwelling far off from them for the purpose of all in this hill has been dug or chiseled off to make this rock cut bed. So this is actually referring to a Evang Alang, that is the rock cut cave which has been made by digging off, that is Kuda Sfatang. Kuda means a cave which has been actually sfata, that is chiseled off to make the bed. So it refers to a bed, and it is actually an administrative record where the completion of the work has actually been, that is the Athakamma has been given, and then a reporting that it has been completed. And from here you can see the Jogimara cave, which is actually the main concern of this class. So we are going to learn about the Jogimara cave inscription. At Jogimara there are no steps to reach the cave. So it shows that it was not for normal visit, or the inscription was not made for the purpose of reading of the normal people who visit the caves. So these caves were basically resting places for long distance travelers. As on the top you can see there is a limestone plastering, and also hematite drawings have been made using hematite. So there are paintings on the roof of the Jogimara caves, which also shows people who are strolling around or roaming around in the site. You can see the human figures here. There is a place which has been cut across the hill for light to come in. Now here the Jogimara cave inscription has 5 lines. The first 2 lines are actually erased by the person who has engraved. You can see these are very small lines, and these are actually repetitions of what has been mentioned in line 3. So line 1 and 2 are actually erasers, and the scribe decides to write it again, rather the engraver decides to write it again. And it reads Suta Nuka Nama, then there is a full stop, then it reads Deva Dashi. Line 4 reads Tang kamai thava luna sheye. Then again there are two full stops, and in between you have a large letter which is KYI, ki. And the last line reads Devadina nama, full stop, and again Lupadakhe, again a full stop. So this inscription actually talks about Shutanuka, and nama can be taken as the name, or it can be taken as Namaskar, that is venerating the Sutanuka, the beautiful bodied woman, and who is a Devadasi. Here you can see the letter Sh is a palatal Sh, which should have been a dental S. So here the use of Magadhi has been done. So a person who has travelled all the way from Magad would have engraved this inscription. Line 2 mentions Tang Kamai Thaba, that is for you to lie down, that is Kamai, lie down. Thaba means thapya, this bed has been made. Luna sheye means lena shayya, that is rock-cut bed. So the rock-cut bed has been made for you to lie down. The next line reads Devadina nama, that is the Lupadaka, the one who has given form, that is the architect or the sculptor whose name is Devadina. So either nama can stand for name or venerating Devadina, or Namaskara to Devadina, who is the Rupadaksha. The language, as I have mentioned, is Magadhi Prakrit, and the rules are Ra becomes La, and like in the previous inscription, the Sitavenga inscription, we had seen Dure Vasantiya becomes Dule Vasantiya, that is Ra becomes La, and the dental Sa becomes palatal Sha, that is in Devadasi, it becomes Devadashi. And we are sure that the person who had engraved does not belong to this region and had travelled here in this region from a place that is the Magadhi speaking zone. So now you have learnt with me a little about the Sitavenga inscription and the Jogimara inscription, mainly the Jogimara inscription, which is a cave inscription. But this is not an Ashokan inscription. It only belongs to the Mauryan realm. So we have taken into consideration 3 different inscriptions, rather 4, because contextually we have brought in the Sitavenga inscription as well. But here we have tried to discuss the 3 inscriptions of the Mauryan realm, which are actually engraved in the characters of 3rd century or 2nd century BCE, and it talks about the 13th rock edict of Ashoka, that is a major rock edict where he talks about the remorse and the Kalinga war and the Yona Rajas, and also the other territories which are situated far off, and how he has propagated Dhamma for the betterment of life in this world as well as in the other world. And the second one which we had learned was the Barabar hill cave inscriptions, which are 3 in number and which belong to Ashoka. These are donative in character and these are not exhortations basically. And the last one which we had done is the Sitavenga and the Jogimara group, which is the Ramgarh inscriptions, and these do not belong to Ashoka. They are only during the time of the Mauryans, which actually gives the information about a Devadasi. This is for the first time from an inscription we get the term Devadasi and also the term Rupadaksha. So thank you for attending the EPG Pathshala with me, Professor Shushmita Basu Majumdar, and learning inscriptions of the Mauryan realm. Thank you for attending the EPG Pathshala with me, Professor Shushmita Basu Majumdar, and do visit EPG Pathshala to learn more about inscriptions.